Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku and Bakugo were best friends from the start. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world, for a 4-year-old Izuku Midoriya, was a vibrant tapestry of infinite possibilities, and at the center of that tapestry, glowing with the brilliance of 1,000 suns, was Katsuki Bakugo. They were in their usual spot, the small wooded area behind the neighborhood park that they had unilaterally declared their agency. The sunlight, filtered through the thick canopy of summer leaves, dappled the ground in shifting patterns of green and gold. Izuku was meticulously arranging smooth stones in a large circle, their designated briefing room, while Katsuki was perched on a large, moss-covered log, swinging his legs with an impatient energy that seemed to hum in the very air around him. "Hurry up, Deku," Katsuki grumbled, though the name held none of the venom it would in another world. Here, it was just a name, a familiar sound, as much a part of their friendship as the cicadas buzzing in the trees. The nickname had stuck from a misreading of his name, and since Katsuki had said it with a grin instead of a sneer, Izuku had never minded. "Almost done, Kaken," Izuku replied, his brow furrowed in concentration. A hero's base has to be perfect. All Might's is probably perfect. All Might's base is the whole city, Katsuki declared, puffing out his chest. "When we're heroes, our base will be bigger than this. It'll be a huge tower, and you'll have a giant computer room, and I'll have a training room that can handle all my explosions." Izuku's eyes widened, a universe of awe contained within them. "Explosions? You think your quirk will be explosions?" It was the question of the month. Both boys were on the cusp of that magical age where the extraordinary became reality. Every scraped knee, every sudden sneeze, every strange feeling was met with breathless anticipation. "Is this it? Is this my quirk?" Katsuki hopped off the log, a confident smirk plastered on his face. "It's gonna be something amazing. Something flashy and strong, like Dad's. Or maybe I'll be able to pull things to me, like your mom." He held out his hands, concentrating hard. Nothing happened. He scowled. Come on. Izuku watched, his own hands clasped together in hopeful prayer for his friend. He wanted Katsuki to have the coolest quirk in the world. A hero needed a cool quirk, and Katsuki was going to be the best hero. Then it happened. It wasn't a grand, earth-shaking event. It was small. A tiny pop in the palm of Katsuki's outstretched hand, like a kernel of corn bursting into popcorn. A faint, sweet smell, like caramelizing sugar, wafted into the air. A single, miniature spark fizzled into existence, bright and orange, before vanishing. Silence. Katsuki stared at his palm, his red eyes wide with disbelief. Izuku's own green eyes were like saucers. "Kaken," Izuku whispered, his voice trembling with excitement. "You did it." A slow, wide grin spread across Katsuki's face, a look of pure, unadulterated joy. He looked at his hand, then at Izuku, his grin turning manic with glee. "I did it! I did it!" He tried again, concentrating with all his might. Pop! Pop pop! A series of small, crackling sparks danced in his palm, brighter this time, warmer. Izuku scrambled to his feet and rushed over, peering at Katsuki's hands as if they held the secrets of the universe. "That's amazing! It's like little fireworks. You have a firework quirk. That's so cool." "It's not fireworks, it's explosions," Katsuki corrected him, his voice booming with newfound pride. He held up his sparkling hand. "Look, Deku!" With this, he gestured with his explosive hand, "and your smarts," he jabbed a finger at Izuku's forehead, making him giggle, "will be the best heroes ever. No villain will stand a chance." Izuku's heart felt like it was going to burst. It was perfect. Kaken had the power, and he had his notebooks. He'd already started one, titled Hero Analysis for the Future, and the first page was dedicated to All Might. Now, the second page would be dedicated to Kaken. He would study every hero, figure out all their weaknesses, and make plans. Kaken would execute them flawlessly. They would be an unstoppable team. In that sun-dappled clearing, surrounded by the hum of summer, a dream was forged not in rivalry, but in perfect, innocent synergy. It was the two of them against the world, a future painted in the brilliant hues of orange explosions, and the boundless green of Izuku's hopeful eyes. The next 6 months were a blur of joyous discovery. Katsuki's quirk developed rapidly. The small pops became concussive blasts that could send pebbles skittering across the ground. The single sparks became miniature, contained detonations he could hold in his palm. He was a prodigy, a natural, and Izuku was his biggest fan and most trusted advisor. If you cup your hands like this, Kaken, Izuku would say, holding up his own small hands, maybe you can direct the blast in one direction. Like a rocket. And Katsuki, ever confident but never dismissive of Izuku's ideas, would try it. The resulting blast was messy and uncontrolled, kicking up a cloud of dust that made them both cough, but the principle was sound. You're a genius, Deku! Katsuki would crow, wiping dirt from his face. We'll call that the blast rush. Their little agency grew. Other kids, like Tsubasa with his budding wings, were drawn to Katsuki's incredible power and charisma. But the hierarchy was clear. Katsuki was the leader, the undeniable center of their group. But Izuku was his right hand, the strategist. When they played heroes versus villains, it was Izuku who would whisper the plan into Katsuki's ear. Okay, make them think you're going to attack from the front, Izuku would mutter from behind a bush. I'll circle around with Tsubasa and we'll surprise them from behind the slide. Katsuki would grin, give a sharp nod, and execute the plan with explosive flair. He never claimed Izuku's plans as his own. When their villains were captured and asked how he did it, he'd always point a thumb back at the green-haired boy. Deku's idea. He's the brains. It made Izuku's chest swell with pride. This was how it was meant to be. Soon, he would get his quirk. He hoped for something that would help their team. Maybe supersight to help him analyze from far away, or a telekinesis quirk to help with rescues while Kaken fought. The possibilities were endless, and every night he would fall asleep dreaming of the day he and Kaken would debut as the world's greatest hero duo. The day of his doctor's appointment arrived on a wave of uncontainable excitement. He practically bounced in his seat the entire car ride, chattering nonstop to his mother about what his quirk might be. The doctor's office was sterile and white, smelling faintly of antiseptic. The doctor himself was a kindly-looking man with a large, bushy mustache. He put Izuku's X-ray up on the light box. It showed the bones of his foot. Well, Mrs. Midoriya, the doctor said, turning to Inko with a professionally gentle expression. It's best to be straightforward. You see this X-ray? In Quirkara humans, the joint in the pinky toe is absent, a vestigial remnant of an earlier stage of evolution. Izuku has 2 joints. It's a very rare thing to see these days, but it's a clear indicator. Izuku didn't understand. He looked from the X-ray to the doctor, then to his mother, whose smile had become fragile, like a pane of glass about to shatter. The doctor sighed softly, turning his gaze to the small, hopeful boy. I'm sorry, kid. It's not going to happen for you. The words didn't register at first. They were just sounds, disconnected from meaning. Not going to happen for you. You mean, he's a late bloomer? Inko asked, her voice a strained whisper. No, the doctor said, his tone leaving no room for argument. The analysis is definitive. Your son is quirkless. Quirkless. The word was a black hole. It sucked all the light, all the color, all the sound out of the room. Izuku's vision tunneled. The white walls seemed to close in on him. The kindly doctor's face swam before his eyes. Quirkless. It was a death sentence for his dream. A hero without a quirk? It was impossible. It was a joke. The ride home was silent. The drive back to their apartment complex felt like a funeral procession. Inko kept glancing at him in the rearview mirror, her eyes filled with a pain that mirrored his own. That evening, Izuku sat in his computer chair, the room dark save for the light of the monitor. He had the video pulled up. The one he'd watched 1,000 times. All Might, in his debut video, saving 100 people from a disaster, laughing in the face of danger. He's so cool, a tiny, broken voice whispered in the dark. The door creaked open. Inko stood in the doorway, her silhouette haloed by the light from the hall. She saw him pointing a trembling finger at the screen. Mom, he asked, his voice cracking as he turned the chair to face her. tears finally streaming down his face, hot and unstoppable. Can I be a hero too? Inko's composure shattered. She rushed forward, wrapping her arms around her son, her own tears soaking into his hair. I'm sorry, Izuku, she sobbed, holding him tight. I'm so sorry. It wasn't the answer he wanted. It wasn't the answer he needed. In that moment, he felt a profound and terrifying loneliness. His dream, the one that had defined his entire existence, had just died. The next day was a gray, formless fog. Izuku didn't want to go outside. He didn't want to see anyone. Most of all, he didn't want to see Kaken. How could he? How could he face his best friend, the one with the perfect hero's quirk, and tell him that he was nothing? That he was a broken part, a useless Deku in the truest sense of the word? He was sitting on his bedroom floor, listlessly tracing the patterns on his All Might rug, when the doorbell rang. He heard his mother's soft voice, then a much louder, more familiar one. Is he in his room? What's wrong with him? He wasn't at the agency. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. Kaken. A moment later, his bedroom door burst open. Katsuki stood there, hands shoved in his pockets, a scowl on his face. There you are. Your mom looks like she's been crying. What's going on? Did you get your quirk? Is it something lame? Izuku couldn't look at him. He stared at the floor, his small body trembling. I went to the doctor yesterday, and? Katsuki prompted, stepping into the room. The words wouldn't come out. A huge, painful lump had formed in his throat. He just shook his head, a fresh wave of tears blurring his vision. Katsuki's scowl softened into a look of confusion. He knelt down in front of Izuku, trying to meet his eyes. Hey! What is it? Just tell me. I don't have one, Izuku finally choked out, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. The doctor said. I'm quirkless. He squeezed his eyes shut, bracing for the inevitable. For the laughter, the scorn, the disappointment. The end of their friendship. The end of everything. He heard Katsuki shift. He felt a hand on his shoulder, but it wasn't a shove. It was surprisingly gentle. He risked a glance up. Katsuki wasn't laughing. He wasn't sneering. His face was a mask of thunderous, confused fury. But it wasn't directed at Izuku. What? Katsuki growled, his voice low and dangerous. What do you mean, quirkless? That's stupid. The doctor's an idiot. He showed my mom the X-ray, Izuku whispered, fresh tears rolling down his cheeks. The toe joint, it means I can't. So what? Katsuki suddenly yelled, making Izuku flinch. He wasn't yelling at him, though. He was yelling at the universe. He stood up, his hands clenched into tight fists, and a few angry sparks popped from his knuckles. So you don't have a quirk? Who cares? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. He looked down at Izuku, who was staring at him with wide, tear-filled eyes. The anger on Katsuki's face was fierce, a protective fire. It was an anger for him. Get up, Katsuki commanded, his voice rough. He grabbed Izuku's arm and pulled him to his feet. Izuku stumbled, his legs feeling like jelly. We're going out. But... Kaken. No buts. Katsuki snapped, tugging him towards the door. Are you still the same Deku who came up with the surprise slide attack plan? Izuku sniffled, wiping his nose on his sleeve. Why yes. Are you still the one who knows all of All Might's special moves? Yes. Then who gives a crap about a stupid toe joint? Katsuki dragged him out of the apartment, past the startled Inko, and down the stairs. He didn't stop until they reached the familiar path that led to the riverbed, the same one they crossed every day. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reminded Izuku of Katsuki's explosions. The water gurgled over the smooth stones, a peaceful sound that was at odds with the storm in Izuku's heart. Katsuki finally let go of his arm and rounded on him, his red eyes blazing with an intensity that Izuku had never seen before. Listen to me, you idiot, Katsuki said, his voice serious. Our plan doesn't change. Nothing changes. But I can't be a hero without a quirk. Izuku cried, the full weight of his despair crashing down on him again. I can't fight. I'll just get in your way. I'll be useless. Shut up. Bakugo's roar echoed across the river. It wasn't a roar of malice, but of pure, frustrated loyalty. He stepped forward and grabbed the front of Izuku's shirt, pulling him close. You will never be useless. You're the smartest person I know. You're smarter than me. You're smarter than all the other kids. You're probably smarter than most of the pro heroes. He let go of Izuku's shirt and pointed a finger at his own chest, where his heart was pounding. I've got the power. I'll have enough power for both of us. My explosions will get stronger and stronger until no one can stop me. I'll be the one who does all the punching and blasting. Then, he pointed that same finger at Izuku. But you've got the brain. You'll be the one who tells me what to punch and where to blast. You'll see the things I miss. You'll make the plans. You'll figure out the villain's weaknesses. Izuku stared at him, speechless. The tears had stopped. He could feel the warmth radiating from Katsuki, a familiar heat that was now a source of comfort instead of just awe. Katsuki took a deep breath, his expression set with an unbreakable resolve that seemed far too mature for a 4-year-old. He held out his hand. You don't need a quirk when you've got me, he said, his voice firm and clear, a declaration that cut through all of Izuku's fear and self-pity. I'll be your firepower. You be my strategist. He grabbed Izuku's hand, his own warm and slightly rough, and squeezed it tight. We do this together. That's the promise. The #1 hero team. Got it? Looking into Katsuki's fierce, unwavering eyes, Izuku felt something shift inside him. The black hole of despair didn't vanish entirely, but a new light began to dawn at its edge. A different kind of hope. It wasn't the dream he had imagined, but it was a dream. A shared one. He squeezed Katsuki's hand back, a small, determined nod his only answer. Yeah, Kaken, he finally whispered, his voice hoarse but steady. Got it. By the riverbed, as the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, a promise was sealed. Not in blood, but in the explosive loyalty of one friend and the quiet, resilient heart of another. The path forward would be harder than they could ever imagine, but for the first time since the doctor's diagnosis, Izuku Midoriya didn't feel alone. 10 years later, the ring of the school bell was a gunshot signaling the end of a hostage situation. Izuku Midoriya packed his bag with practiced efficiency, his mind already miles away. Middle school was a necessary purgatory, a waiting room for life to actually begin. Oh, Izuku. Izuku looked up. Katsuki was leaning against his desk, arms crossed, his Yurei application form held casually in one hand. 10 years had sharpened his features, turning his childhood confidence into a razor-edged swagger. His explosions were no longer just pops and crackles. They were controlled, powerful detonations that he could shape and direct with terrifying precision. Yet the look in his eyes when he spoke to Izuku was the same as it had always been, familiar, direct, and completely devoid of condescension. You finished the analysis on Kamui Woods' lacquered chain prison? Katsuki asked, jerking his chin towards the slightly battered notebook Izuku was sliding into his backpack. Hero Analysis for the Future, Volume 13. Mostly, Izuku said, a familiar spark of enthusiasm lighting his face. His quirk is incredibly versatile for capture and mobility, but it shows a significant weakness to large-scale, non-targeted destructive power. If a villain can cause enough collateral damage, he has to choose between maintaining the capture and protecting civilians. Also, it's wood. Obviously, it's vulnerable to fire and explosions, Katsuki added with a predatory grin. Good. Let me see it tonight. I've been working on a new wide-area blast. Need you to time the particle spread. Of course, Izuku said, his smile genuine. This was their normal. For a decade, they had honed their partnership. While Katsuki pushed his body and his quirk to their absolute limits, Izuku had pushed his mind. His notebooks weren't a secret, pathetic hobby. They were a shared resource, a tactical database for their future agency. Katsuki would describe a new move he was thinking of, and Izuku would break it down, analyze its potential applications, point out flaws, and suggest improvements. They were a two-man research and development team. Their dynamic was an accepted anomaly at Aldera Junior High. The other students didn't understand it. They saw Bakugo, the explosive prodigy destined for greatness, and Midoriya, the quiet, quirkless kid who trailed in his wake. They mistook support for servitude, but anyone who tried to bully Izuku learned their mistake quickly and painfully. A warning blast from Katsuki's palm and a low growl of "leave my strategist alone" was usually enough to send them scrambling. As they walked home, their conversation was a mix of mundane school chatter and high-level hero theory. They passed a commotion downtown, a villain attack. It was a giant of a man, his quirk allowing him to grow to colossal sizes. "Mount Lady's gonna debut," Izuku muttered, already pulling out his notebook. "Her size is impressive, but it'll cause a ton of property damage. Not very efficient for urban environments." "Show off," Katsuki grunted, though he was watching with a critical eye. "One good hit to the back of the knee and she'd fold. Needs to protect her joints better." They were so engrossed in their analysis that they almost missed the second incident. A sludge-like creature, fleeing the scene, sloshed into a nearby alley. They only paid it a moment's notice before continuing on their way, their minds already focused on their UA entrance exam training. It was later, as Izuku was walking through a crowded underpass, that his day took a sharp, horrific turn. The stench hit him first, like an open sewer. Then the sound, a wet, gurgling struggle. The sludge villain from earlier erupted from a manhole cover, a swirling mass of putrid green slime and malevolent eyes. Before Izuku could even process the danger, the villain lunged. A medium-sized invisibility cloak, it gurgled, its form enveloping him. Slime forced its way into his mouth, his nose. He couldn't breathe. His lungs burned. Panic, cold and absolute, seized him. His limbs thrashed uselessly against the fluid body of his captor. "I'm going to die. Is this it?" After all this time. Suddenly, a voice boomed through the underpass. Texas smash! A hurricane of wind pressure tore the villain apart, splattering it against the walls. Izuku collapsed to the ground, gasping, coughing, his vision swimming. Towering over him was the colossal, smiling form of All Might. His hero. His idol. The subsequent events were a blur. All Might collected the villain in a soda bottle, apologized for getting Izuku caught in his fight, and even signed his notebook. But as the hero prepared to leap away, the desperation that had been a quiet hum in Izuku's heart for 10 years screamed to the surface. He did something stupid. He grabbed onto All Might's leg. He found himself on a rooftop, listening to a story he never could have imagined. All Might's secret. The injury. The time limit. And when Izuku, his voice trembling, asked the question that had defined his entire existence, "Can even someone without a quirk become a hero like you?" he received the answer he had always dreaded. "Pros are always risking their lives," the skeletal man said, his voice heavy with regret. "So no, I honestly don't think you can become a hero without a quirk." The words were a physical blow. He thought he had made peace with it. He thought his role as Kaken's partner was enough. But hearing it from All Might himself, it broke something deep inside him. He trudged down the stairs of the building in a daze, the hero's words echoing in his head. "It's not bad to dream. But you have to be realistic." He was so lost in his misery that he didn't notice the crowd until he was in the middle of it. An explosion ripped through the air, and his head snapped up. It was a sound he knew as well as his own name, Kaken's quirk. He pushed his way to the front. And his world stopped. It was the same sludge villain. It must have escaped from All Might's pocket. And it had a new hostage. Thrashing, fighting, setting off desperate, panicked explosions that were only succeeding in starting fires, was Katsuki Bakugo. Their eyes met across the chaos. In Katsuki's red eyes, Izuku saw something he had never seen before: fear. True, genuine terror. He was suffocating. His quirk was powerful, but it was useless when he couldn't breathe, when his own struggles were being turned against him. The pro-heroes stood by, helpless. Death Arms couldn't get a grip. Backdraft was busy with the fires. Kamui Woods couldn't do anything in the narrow, flame-filled alley. They were waiting for someone with the right quirk. Izuku's legs moved before he could think. But his mind wasn't blank. It was a supercomputer running at 1,000 miles per hour. A decade of analysis, of planning, of being Kaken's other half, kicked into overdrive. Notebook Volume 13, page 26. Slime-type villains, main body is fluid, invulnerable to blunt force. Sensory organs, The eyes are solid. Weakness is targeted solid projectiles. Kaken's position, he's being held from behind. Can't aim his blasts properly. Suffocating. Needs a distraction. Needs air. My assets, a single backpack. Contents, 2 textbooks, a binder, 3 pencils, 1 heavy notebook. Weight, approximately 4.5 kilograms. Effective range, 10 meters. He broke through the police line, a green blur of sheer desperation. The heroes yelled at him. Kid, no! It's too dangerous. He didn't hear them. He saw the trajectory. He saw the target. He swung his bright yellow backpack off his shoulder, spinning it once to build momentum. This wasn't a reckless, thoughtless act of a fanboy. This was a strategist executing the only plan available to him with the only tool he had. He launched the backpack. It flew through the air, a perfect arc, and struck the sludge villain directly in its right eye. The villain roared in pain and surprise, its fluid form recoiling for a split second. The grip on Katsuki's mouth and nose loosened. It was the only opening they needed. Katsuki sucked in a desperate, ragged breath of air. His eyes, clear of terror and now blazing with fury and understanding, locked back onto Izuku's. He didn't need to speak. Izuku knew what was coming. Izuku clawed at the slime, trying to free his friend, his mind screaming, just a little more. You! The villain gurgled, recovering. I'll kill you! It lunged, but it was too late. With that single breath of air, Katsuki had all the fuel he needed. Howitzer impact. A massive, focused explosion erupted from his palms. It wasn't wild and panicked like before. It was controlled. It was powerful. It blasted the sludge villain away from them both, weakening its hold just as a familiar, booming voice echoed through the street. All Might, having been shamed into action by the quirkless boy's bravery, landed with a ground-shaking impact. Detroit smash, he bellowed, and the resulting punch changed the weather, scattering the villain into harmless puddles and extinguishing the fires with the force of its wind. The aftermath was a whirlwind of noise. The press swarmed All Might. The pro-heroes praised Katsuki for his tenacity while simultaneously scolding Izuku for his recklessness. Izuku stood there, trembling, soaking it all in, expecting the worst. He expected Kaken to be furious. He had interfered. He had been a liability. But then, a hand clamped down on his shoulder. He looked up to see Katsuki standing over him, covered in sludge and soot, breathing heavily. His face wasn't angry. It was shaken, pale, but his eyes held a look of profound, grudging gratitude. You idiot, Katsuki rasped, his voice hoarse. He pulled Izuku into a rough, one-armed hug, clapping him hard on the back. See? Told you. We're a team. Izuku felt a wave of relief so powerful it almost buckled his knees. He had been so scared, so sure he had failed, but he hadn't. Their promise held. As they were turning to leave, trying to escape the chaos, a voice called out to them. You too. Wait. They turned. It was All Might, back in his skeletal form, looking at them with an expression Izuku couldn't quite decipher. He wasn't just looking at Izuku, the boy who had rushed in. He was looking at both of them. At the explosive prodigy and the quirkless analyst standing side by side, covered in the grime of a shared battle. All Might's gaze flickered between them, the raw, untamed power and the sharp, strategic mind. He had seen a reckless child run into danger. But he had also seen a calculated strike that created an opportunity. He had seen a victim become a fighter. He had seen synergy in its purest, most desperate form. He hadn't just witnessed one boy's heroic spirit. He had witnessed the birth of a legendary partnership. I need to talk to you, All Might said, his voice quiet but full of a strange, new weight. Both of you. The world had dissolved into a roaring cacophony. Reporters shouted questions, heroes offered terse statements, and the flickering lights of phone cameras created a dizzying, disorienting strobe effect. Izuku Midoriya stood numbly beside Katsuki Bakugo, the adrenaline from the fight draining away, leaving behind a hollow, trembling exhaustion. The heroes were scolding him, their words a meaningless drone, reckless, irresponsible. You could have gotten yourself killed. He knew they were right, but their lectures felt distant, disconnected from the reality of what had happened. He had seen his best friend, his other half, suffocating. The world could have ended in that moment, and he wouldn't have cared about the rules. Katsuki, for his part, was having none of it. "Shut up," he snarled at Death Arms, who was in the middle of a stern lecture. "He did more than any of you were doing. You were all just standing there with your thumbs up your asses waiting for a better quirk to show up." The pro-hero recoiled, stunned into silence by the sheer audacity of the sludge-covered teenager. It was into this chaotic bubble that the quiet voice cut through, sharp and clear as a scalpel. "You too." "Wait." They turned in unison, a habit ingrained over a decade of partnership. The man who stood before them was impossibly thin, a walking skeleton with sunken eyes and a shock of blonde hair that seemed too heavy for his frail neck. It was the man from the rooftop, the true form of All Might. The man who had crushed his dreams only to inadvertently show him they were still worth fighting for. "I need to talk to you," All Might said, his gaze intense, sweeping over both of them. "Both of you." Katsuki's brow furrowed, his default expression of aggressive suspicion falling into place. "And who the hell are you, creepy skeleton man?" he demanded, stepping slightly in front of Izuku, a protective gesture so ingrained it was subconscious. Izuku's heart hammered against his ribs. "Kaken, wait," he whispered, grabbing his friend's arm. It's complicated." All Might offered a thin, weary smile. "A valid question, young Bakugo. Please follow me." "Not here." He gestured down a less crowded side street, away from the prying eyes and cameras. Wary but intrigued by Izuku's uncharacteristic nervousness, Katsuki relented with a grunt. "Fine. But if this is weird, I'm blasting you into next week." "Fair enough," All Might conceded. He led them through a maze of back alleys, the sounds of the city fading into a distant hum. They finally stopped in a small, forgotten pocket park, nestled between two drab office buildings, a rusty swing set and a single concrete bench were its only occupants. The setting sun cast long, distorted shadows, creating an atmosphere of secrecy and confession. All Might leaned against a tree, letting out a long, pained sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. He looked at Izuku first. "Young Midoriya. What I said on that roof earlier, I stand by it as a general truth. A hero's job is one of constant, mortal peril. It is not a path for the unequipped." Izuku flinched, the words still a fresh wound. However, All Might continued, turning his piercing gaze to include Katsuki. "I am a fool. I spoke of rules and realities, but I failed to embody the most important lesson of any hero, to act when others will not." He looked back at Izuku, his eyes holding a new, profound respect. "You, a quirkless, terrified boy, were the only one who moved. You spurred me to action. You reminded me what it truly means to be a hero." He then fixed his gaze on Katsuki. "And you, young Bakugo. I saw you fighting. Your quirk is magnificent, powerful. But you were trapped, panicked. Your raw power was working against you. What's your point, old man?" Katsuki said, crossing his arms, though his usual belligerence was tempered by a thread of curiosity. "My point," All Might said, his voice dropping, "is what happened when young Midoriya ran in. I watched from the corner, you see. Paralyzed by my own weakness. I saw it all. It wasn't just a reckless charge. He didn't just run. He threw his bag. A calculated, desperate, brilliant move. He targeted your captor's only physical vulnerability, its eyes. It was a 1-in-a-million shot, but it was a plan. It created an opening, a single second for you to breathe. And in that second, you didn't just panic and blast. You took that breath, and you unleashed a focused, controlled counterattack. You two acted as one. A strategist and a warrior." Izuku stared, stunned. All Might hadn't just seen his fear. He'd seen his thought process. Katsuki's eyes widened slightly. He remembered it now. The stinging impact on the villain's face, the momentary release, the single, life-giving gasp of air, and Izuku's frantic, clawing hands. It had all happened in a blur, but the skinny man was right. Deku hadn't just gotten in the way. He'd created the damn opening. "Who are you?" Katsuki asked again, his voice now devoid of mockery, replaced by genuine confusion. "How do you know all that?" All Might smiled, a sad, knowing expression on his skeletal face. "Because I was there. In more ways than one. He straightened up, taking a deep breath. I suppose I owe you both the full truth. And then it happened. Steam erupted from his body like a geyser. His frail limbs began to expand, his sunken cheeks filled out, and his muscles swelled at an impossible rate. In a matter of seconds the gaunt, skeletal man was gone, and in his place stood the colossal, grinning god of peace, All Might. I am here! He boomed, his signature smile firmly in place, though his eyes held a serious light. Izuku was prepared for it, but it was still a shock. Katsuki, however, was not. His jaw, for the first time in Izuku's memory, literally dropped. His red eyes were wide as dinner plates, all aggression and swagger vaporized and replaced with pure, unadulterated shock. He took a half-step back, his mind visibly struggling to connect the two images. The walking corpse and the number one hero. It was impossible. It defied all logic. No fucking way, Katsuki breathed, the words barely a whisper. The very same, All Might said, his voice deep and resonant. He gestured for them to sit on the concrete bench, the metal groaning in protest as he sat beside them. Please, what I am about to tell you is a secret of the highest order, one that has been kept for generations. A secret that, if revealed, could plunge our society into chaos. Izuku and Katsuki sat down, their movements stiff and robotic. Katsuki kept glancing from All Might's massive bicep to the spot where the skinny man had stood, as if trying to solve an impossible puzzle. All Might began to speak. He told them everything. He told them of his devastating injury, sustained 5 years ago in a battle so secret it was never made public. He lifted his shirt to show them the gruesome, swirling scar that marred his side, a vortex of ruined tissue that made both boys recoil. He explained his time limit, the dwindling embers of his power, and then he told them the true secret. The one that underpinned everything. My quirk, he said, his voice a low rumble, is not something I was born with. It was passed on to me. Like a sacred torch, he explained the nature of one for all. A quirk that could be transferred from person to person, a crystallization of power that stockpiled strength with each new user, cultivated for one singular purpose, to defeat an ultimate evil. He spoke of its nemesis, a shadowy mastermind named All for One, a villain who could steal quirks and redistribute them, the boogeyman of the criminal underworld, the very villain who had given him his career-ending injury. Izuku listened, his mind racing, connecting dots he never knew existed. The sheer scale of it was terrifying, a secret war being waged in the shadows of their peaceful society. Katsuki listened with a rapt, focused intensity, the kind of focus he usually reserved for a difficult fight. This was bigger than Yue. This was bigger than being the number one hero. This was the very foundation of their world. I defeated him, All Might said, a flicker of pain in his eyes. But my master, the one who gave me this power, was killed in the process. And I fear he is not truly gone. The world needs a symbol of peace. It needs a pillar to stand against the darkness. My time is running out. I need to find a successor. He turned, his massive form eclipsing the fading light, and looked directly at Izuku. The full, immeasurable weight of his gaze fell upon the small, trembling boy. Young Midoriya, All Might declared, his voice ringing with conviction. I watched you today. You may not have a powerful quirk, or any quirk at all. But you have something far more important. When everyone else, myself included, saw a hopeless situation, you saw a person in need. You acted. Your body moved before you had a chance to think. That is the mark of a true hero. He leaned in, his shadow enveloping Izuku. Young Midoriya, I have deemed you worthy to inherit my power. I want to give you my quirk. One for all can be yours. The world tilted on its axis. Izuku's mind went blank. The words echoed in the sudden, ringing silence of his ears. Inherit my power. My quirk can be yours. It was a nonsensical string of syllables. The man who told him he couldn't be a hero was now offering him the single greatest power on the planet. The whiplash was so severe he felt dizzy, nauseous. Tears welled in his eyes without his permission. It was too much. Too big. His first instinct, his only instinct, was to turn to his anchor. He whipped his head around to look at Katsuki. His expression was a frantic, silent plea for help, for guidance, for something to make sense of the madness. Kaken, what do I do? Katsuki was staring at All Might, then at Izuku, his face a complex storm of emotions. Izuku saw the flicker of initial shock. He saw the confusion. He saw the cogs turning in Katsuki's brilliant, tactical mind. He braced himself for the explosion, for the rage, for the cry of why him? Why the useless, quirkless Deku? It was the logical reaction. Anyone would feel that way. But this wasn't just anyone. This was Katsuki Bakugo, his best friend. Katsuki's gaze shifted from Izuku's tear-streaked face to his own hands, which were still covered in drying sludge. He remembered the feeling of suffocation, the utter helplessness, and he remembered the yellow backpack. He remembered the plan, and then it clicked. A look of stunning, terrifying clarity dawned on his face. The confusion vanished, replaced by a manic, incandescent excitement that was far more potent than any anger. He lunged forward, not at All Might, but at Izuku, grabbing him by the shoulders. His grip was iron. Do it, you idiot! Katsuki roared, his voice so loud it made the swings on the rusty set rattle. Izuku stared at him, utterly dumbfounded. What? Are you deaf? Do it! Katsuki shook him, a wild, ecstatic grin spreading across his face. This is it. This is the piece we were missing. Don't you see? He let go of Izuku and began to pace back and forth in front of the bench, his movements crackling with explosive energy. Think about it, Deku. It's perfect. You're quirkless. You're an empty container, just like he said. There's no other quirk to mix with it, and make it go all screwy. He whirled around, pointing a finger at Izuku. You've got the heart. You've got the stupid, reckless, heroic spirit. That's what he saw. That's what I've always seen. Then he jabbed a thumb at his own chest. I've got the power, the aggression, the drive to win. You have the brains and the strategy. But what was always our biggest problem? Our biggest weakness? That you couldn't stand on the front lines with me. That you couldn't take a hit. His voice rose to a fever pitch, filled with the sheer, unadulterated joy of a general who had just been handed the ultimate weapon. This solves it. This solves everything. My explosions, your brain, and All Might's power? Together? We won't just be the #1 hero team, we'll be unstoppable. We'll be legends. There wasn't a single shred of jealousy in his voice. There was no resentment. There was only the pure, triumphant thrill of their shared dream suddenly becoming not just possible, but inevitable. He saw One for All not as a gift given to his friend, but as a new, critical asset acquired for their team. It was the key that unlocked their full potential. All Might watched this exchange, a slow, deep smile spreading across his face. He had expected jealousy, conflict, a schism between the two boys. He had been prepared to mediate, to explain his reasoning further. But he wasn't seeing a rivalry. He was seeing a force multiplier. He was seeing a partnership so strong that a gift to one was seen as a victory for both. Izuku stared at Katsuki, at the absolute, unwavering belief shining in his friend's eyes. The last vestiges of his own doubt crumbled away. Kaken wasn't jealous. He was thrilled. He saw this as their power, their future. The tears that streamed down Izuku's face were no longer tears of confusion or despair. They were tears of overwhelming gratitude. Gratitude for his idol, the man offering him a miracle, and gratitude for his best friend, the one who made him believe he deserved it. He stood up, his small frame trembling but his spine straight. He looked All Might in the eye. I'll do it, Izuku said, his voice thick with emotion but clear and firm. I accept. I'll do my best. The next 10 months were a carefully orchestrated symphony of pain, sweat, and unwavering determination. The grand plan was laid out by All Might on the shores of the Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, a place that had become a local dump, piled high with decades of illegal trash. To inherit my power, your body needs to become a proper vessel, All Might explained, holding up a thick, multi-page packet titled Aim to Pass, the American Dream Plan. Right now, if you tried to take in One for All, your limbs would pop right off. Izuku paled, but Katsuki just snatched the packet and began flipping through it, his eyes scanning the rigorous diet plans and workout schedules. This is it? He grunted. Looks intense. Good. The plan was brutal. A strict, protein-heavy diet. Hours of sleep meticulously scheduled. And the physical labor, to clean the entire beach by hand before the UA entrance exam. It was a Herculean task, designed to build muscle, endurance, and character. You'll do this, and you'll do it without question, All Might said. This is your path, young Midoriya. He won't be doing it alone, Katsuki declared, tossing the plan back to Izuku. He cracked his knuckles, a few small sparks popping in his palms. This plan is good, but it's static. It's just weightlifting. He needs dynamic training. Reflexes. Combat sense. I'll handle that part. All Might raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Oh, and so, their joint training began. The first week was hell. Izuku would arrive at the beach before dawn, his body aching from the day before, to find Katsuki already there, stretching impatiently. You're late, he'd bark. Let's go. That fridge isn't going to move itself. But it was never just about moving the fridge. As Izuku strained, his muscles screaming, to haul a rusted appliance across the sand, Katsuki would be there, not just shouting, but creating challenges. He'd use a small, controlled blast to kick up a shower of sand near Izuku's face, forcing him to keep his footing and push through the distraction. A villain isn't gonna wait for you to get a good grip. He'd yell. They're gonna hit you with smoke, with debris. Keep your eyes open. Keep moving. He turned the cleanup into a live fire exercise. Izuku would be trying to load a bundle of old tires onto the truck, and Katsuki, from a safe distance, would launch a small, low-powered AP shot at a nearby pile of metal. The resulting clang and ricochet would force Izuku to duck, to weave, to develop a sixth sense for incoming danger that no gym could ever teach him. Their running sessions were even more intense. While All Might, in his skinny form, timed them from the sidelines with a stopwatch, Katsuki would take to the air. Using his explosions for propulsion, he'd fly alongside Izuku on the sand, a human rocket of motivation and insults. Come on, DKU! My grandma could run faster than that, and she's dead. He'd roar over the sound of his own blasts. You wanna be a hero? Heroes don't get tired. They just get more pissed off, but it wasn't just physical. As the months wore on, and Izuku's scrawny frame began to fill out with lean, hard-earned muscle, the training evolved. In the evenings, after hours of hauling trash, they would collapse in Izuku's room, surrounded by textbooks. Okay, explain the inverse square law again, Katsuki would grumble, rubbing his temples. My brain is fried. It's about energy dispersal, Izuku would explain patiently, his exhaustion forgotten in the face of a problem to be solved. He'd sketch out diagrams, showing how the force of Katsuki's explosions dissipated over distance. If you can focus the initial blast into a tighter cone, you'll lose less energy and get more impact at a longer range. That's the theory behind your AP shot, but we can make it more efficient. This was Izuku's side of the training. Katsuki was a genius when it came to combat and instinct, but he often brute-forced his way through problems, including academics. The UA Hero course had a notoriously difficult written exam. It didn't matter how powerful your quirk was if you couldn't pass the academic portion. Izuku became his dedicated tutor, ensuring that while he was building a body worthy of a hero, Katsuki was building a mind worthy of UA's top student. Their collaboration bled into everything. They started workshopping combination moves, theories for a future they could now practically taste. Okay, listen, Izuku said one evening, pacing his room excitedly. It was month 7. He was no longer a stick figure, he was solid, defined. Once I have one for all, if I can learn to channel it into just my legs for a superpowered jump, I could get massive air. What if, at the peak of my jump, you hit my back with a small, precise blast rush? Katsuki's eyes lit up. A mid-air course correction. A guided missile. I could launch you over a wall or change your angle to dodge an attack. Exactly. We could call it Apex Predator or something. Lame name, Katsuki scoffed, but he was grinning. But the move's got potential. We'll work on it. All Might watched all of this with a growing sense of awe. He had intended to mentor a single successor, to pass on his power and his legacy to one boy. But he wasn't just mentoring Izuku, he was mentoring a team. He saw their dynamic, the perfect symbiosis of brain and brawn, of heart and firepower. Izuku's unwavering belief in Katsuki's strength allowed Katsuki to push himself without arrogance, and Katsuki's absolute faith in Izuku's mind gave Izuku the confidence to command, to strategize, to be a leader without a quirk. One afternoon, standing on a cleared section of the beach, Toshinori Yagi watched them. Izuku was trying to move a massive, half-submerged engine block. He was failing, his muscles shaking with the strain. "Use your damn legs, not your back," Katsuki yelled, circling him like a shark. "You're gonna snap yourself in half, you moron." Instead of just shouting, Katsuki got down in the sand, demonstrating the proper form. "Like this. Low center of gravity. Drive up. It's physics." Toshinori felt a smile touch his lips. He had chosen young Midoriya for his heart. But in doing so, he had also gained young Bakugo's fire, not as a rival, but as a forge to temper and shape his successor into something stronger than he could ever be on his own. He was seeing the birth of not just the next symbol of peace, but the next generation's greatest hero partnership. They were two halves of a whole, and one for all was the final piece that would bind them together. The 10 months passed in a flurry of sweat, yelling, and shared breakthroughs. The last piece of trash, a rusted-out bus chassis, was hauled away a week before the exam. Dagoba Beach was pristine, the sand clean and golden under the rising sun, the waves washing gently onto the shore for the first time in years. Izuku stood atop a pile of remaining recyclables, shirtless, his body a testament to his labor. He was no longer the frail, skinny boy from the underpass. He was sculpted, every muscle defined, a network of scars from cuts and scrapes crisscrossing his skin. He let out a roar of pure, triumphant exhaustion that echoed across the clean beach. All Might stood there, his jaw on the floor. "Oh my goodness!" he shouted, transforming into his muscle form with a poof. He took a picture of the crying, screaming boy. "You did it! You exceeded my expectations!" Holy smokes! Katsuki was leaning against the truck, a rare, genuinely proud smirk on his face. "Told you he could do it," he said, tossing a water bottle to Izuku, who caught it deftly. "He's a stubborn bastard." The morning of the UA entrance exam was crisp and bright. Izuku and Katsuki stood before the towering gates of the most prestigious heroes' school in Japan. Izuku was vibrating with a nervous energy so intense it was almost visible. "It's time, young Midoriya," All Might said, appearing from behind a corner in his skeletal form. He held a hand out to Izuku. "For your final test. The one that will allow you to finally sit at the starting line." He plucked a single strand of his golden hair. "Eat this." Izuku stared at the hair. "Huh!" Katsuki burst out laughing, a loud, barking sound. "Are you serious? All this work, all this training, and it ends with him eating your hair? That's the grossest, most awesome thing I've ever heard. To transfer the DNA, you must ingest it," All Might explained, a faint blush on his hollow cheeks. "Now hurry! You don't have much time." Izuku, his face a mask of bewildered determination, took the hair. It was just a hair. A hair that contained the power of generations of heroes, the hope of the world. He closed his eyes, thought of the promise by the riverbed, of his friend's unwavering belief, of the clean beach behind him. He thought of his dream. He put the hair in his mouth and swallowed. For a moment, nothing happened. He just stood there, the taste of All Might's shampoo on his tongue. Then, he felt it. Not an explosion. Not a sudden surge. It was a low, deep hum, like a colossal engine coming to life deep within his soul. It was a feeling of warmth, of power, of presence. It settled into his bones, a quiet, thrumming energy that was waiting for his command. He looked at his hands, then at Katsuki. Katsuki's smirk was gone, replaced by a look of keen intensity. "You feel it?" Izuku nodded, a slow, wondrous smile spreading across his face. "Yeah," he whispered. "I feel it." Katsuki clapped him on the shoulder, hard. "Good. Now let's go past this stupid test." They turned and walked towards the entrance of UA High, side by side, as they had always been. But this time, something was different. They were no longer just a boy with a powerful quirk and his quirkless strategist. They were a perfectly balanced team, armed with explosive power, a brilliant mind, And now, a sacred torch that held the power to change the world. The number 1 hero team was about to make its unofficial debut. The orientation hall was massive, a cavernous space that felt more like an amphitheater for gods than a school auditorium. Hundreds of nervous teenagers from dozens of different junior highs filled the tiered seats, a sea of anxious faces and wildly diverse appearances, each one a hopeful hero. The air was thick with a palpable tension, a mixture of ambition, fear, and the low hum of suppressed quirks. Izuku Midoriya sat ramrod straight in his seat, his hands clasped so tightly in his lap that his knuckles were white. The power of One for All was a living thing inside him, a dormant volcano thrumming beneath his skin. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. He had swallowed the hair less than an hour ago, and he still felt like a tiny boat trying to contain the entire ocean. Every beat of his heart felt like a drumroll for a power he had absolutely no idea how to use. Beside him, Katsuki Bakugo was the picture of coiled, confident energy. He slouched in his chair, arms crossed, exuding an aura of bored impatience. To the casual observer, he looked arrogant, dismissive, but Izuku knew better. He could see the slight, repetitive tap of Katsuki's foot, the way his sharp red eyes scanned the room, cataloging the competition. He wasn't bored. He was a predator surveying his new hunting ground. "You good?" Katsuki muttered, not looking at him. "I think so," Izuku whispered back, his voice trembling slightly. "It feels big." "It is big," Katsuki said. "Just don't try to use it all at once. Remember what All Might said. Think of it like an egg in a microwave. Too much, too fast, and pop." He made a small exploding gesture with his fingers near Izuku's arm, which did little to soothe his nerves. "Right. Microwave egg. Got it." The lights in the hall dimmed, and a single, massive spotlight illuminated the stage. A figure strode into the light, a man with a bizarre, gravity-defying blonde hairdo that resembled a giant speaker. He wore a leather jacket, sunglasses, and a perpetual grin. "Hello, examinees. Welcome to the UA High Entrance Exam," the man yelled, his voice amplified to an ear-splitting volume. "Can I get a he?" Silence. The nervous teenagers stared, nonplussed. "Tough crowd," the hero, Present Mike, mumbled, before launching into a high-speed explanation of the practical exam. "You'll be conducting 10-minute mock urban battles in sprawling replica cities. Each site is crawling with 3 types of foe villains. You earn points based on the difficulty of the villains you defeat." A large screen behind him displayed silhouettes of 3 distinct robots, a sleek, 1-point robot, a sturdy, 2-point brawler, and a towering, 3-point behemoth. The goal was simple: destroy as many as possible to rack up villain points. It was exactly as Izuku had predicted. For months, he had scoured online forums and UA alumni blogs, piecing together the likely format of the exam. He and Katsuki had spent countless evenings devising strategies for this very scenario. Their final planning session had been just last night. A hushed, intense conversation over a shared bowl of Katsudan Inko had made them for good luck. "Okay," Izuku had said, pointing to a hand-drawn map of a generic city block. "The standard approach for power types like you, Kaken, is to go for the big 3-pointers. They're worth the most, but they're also slow and probably heavily armored. Most examinees will rush the center of the city where they're likely to be most concentrated. That's a mistake. It'll be a chaotic free-for-all, so we avoid the scrum," Katsuki had grunted, jabbing a piece of pork with his chopsticks. "We let the small fry tire themselves out on each other. We go for the perimeter." "Exactly," Izuku had agreed, his eyes gleaming with strategic fervor. "We stick to the outer streets. Fewer heroes, more isolated targets. You'll be the destroyer. Your job is pure offense. Wide arc explosions to clear clusters of 1-pointers, and your AP shot for precision strikes on the 2 and 3-pointers joints. You focus on maximizing our villain point score." "And you?" Katsuki had asked, a question that held a decade of weight. Before, the answer would have been, "I'll stay back and analyze." But now, "I'll be the savior," Izuku had declared, his voice filled with a hesitant confidence. I can't control One for All yet. One punch could shatter my arm and take me out of the fight, so I can't risk direct combat unless it's a last resort. But that doesn't mean I'm useless. While you're drawing the villain's attention, I'll focus on the other examinees. There will be kids who get trapped, pinned down, or overwhelmed. Helping them is the heroic thing to do. And even if there are no rescue points, it's what a hero does. Katsuki had finished for him, his expression serious. Okay. Destroyer and savior. I break stuff, you make sure the idiots don't get broken. I like it. It's a solid plan. Back in the auditorium, a stern-looking boy with dark blue hair and glasses shot to his feet, his hand raised with rigid formality. Excuse me, sir. I have a question, he announced, his voice booming with authority. Hit me. President Mike encouraged. The boy pointed a finger at the exam printout. On this handout, there are 4 types of villains listed. If this is a misprint, it is a gross oversight for Japan's top hero school. He then spun around, pointing an accusatory finger directly at Izuku. And you? You have been muttering and fidgeting this entire time. It is distracting and disrespectful. If you are not taking this seriously, then you should leave, Izuku squeaked, hunching his shoulders as dozens of heads turned to glare at him. Katsuki, however, merely draped an arm over the back of Izuku's chair, a lazy, protective gesture. He shot the blue-haired boy a glare so potent it could have melted steel. He's taking it more seriously than you are, 4 eyes, Katsuki growled, his voice a low rumble that carried in the quiet hall. He's my strategist. He's running combat simulations in his head. It's called preparation. Maybe you should try it instead of trying to lick the teacher's boots. The blue-haired boy sputtered, his face turning a brilliant shade of red, but he was silenced by President Mick's booming laugh. All right, examinee 7111, nice catch. Thanks for the question. The pro-hero gestured to the 4th silhouette on the screen, a colossal robot that dwarfed the others. The 4th villain type is the arena trap. It's worth 0 points. Think of it as a giant, roaming obstacle. My advice? Avoid it, with a final, deafening plus ultra. President Mike concluded the briefing. The examinees were shuffled out of the hall and onto large buses, each one destined for a different mock city. Izuku and Katsuki had been assigned to the same one, Battle Center B. A stroke of luck or perhaps, a deliberate choice by whoever was running the show. They stood before a set of massive gates, the entrance to a sprawling, hyper-realistic cityscape of towering buildings, paved streets, and empty storefronts. The air crackled with anticipation. Izuku was doing breathing exercises, trying to calm the raging storm of one for all in his veins. Just a little bit. An egg in a microwave. Don't break the egg. Don't break your arm. Katsuki stretched his arms over his head, his joints popping. He leaned in close to Izuku. Remember the plan. We meet at the Central Plaza in T-9 minutes, or if either of us gets into real trouble, don't do anything stupid. Let me handle the heavy lifting. Right, Izuku nodded, his eyes scanning the city layout beyond the gates. You take the east perimeter, I'll take the west. We'll drive any stragglers toward the center for the other examinees. Showtime, Katsuki grinned, a flash of feral excitement in his eyes. The huge gates began to groan open. Aya and start. President Mick's voice blared from hidden speakers. While the other examinees hesitated for a moment, confused by the lack of a countdown, Katsuki was already moving. With a deafening boom, he launched himself into the air, a human missile propelled by a perfectly controlled explosion. He was over the wall and into the city before most kids had taken their first step. Izuku took a deep breath and ran, following his own designated path down a western street. The city was eerily silent for a moment before the sounds of combat began to echo from all directions. Explosions, screams, the crash of metal on metal. He saw his first targets a block down. A cluster of 3 one-point robots cornering a girl with purple hair and long, dangling earlobes. She was trying to whip them with her earjacks, but they were deflecting the blows, their metal claws getting closer. Izuku's mind raced. Okay. No combat. Rescue focus. Distraction is key. He spotted a pile of discarded metal pipes at a construction site. He didn't need one for all for this. He grabbed a pipe, took aim, and hurled it with all his might. It clattered loudly against the wall behind the robots. They whirred, their optical sensors swiveling towards the sound. It was the opening the girl needed. She expertly plugged her jacks into a nearby power conduit, sending a powerful shockwave through the ground that fried the robot's internal circuitry. They collapsed in a heap. She looked over at Izuku, giving him a grateful nod before running off in search of more points. Izuku felt a small swell of pride. It worked. He could do this. In the Yui observation room, a dozen pro-heroes sat before a bank of monitors, each screen displaying a different angle of the 7 battle centers. The room was dark, the only light coming from the flickering scenes of robotic carnage. Principal Nizu, a small, white-furred creature of indeterminate species, sat at the center, sipping tea. "We've got a promising batch this year," a hero with a cement block head grumbled. "That kid with the engine quirk in Battle Center A is racking up points fast. But look at Battle Center B," said a sleek, dark-haired hero. It was Eraserhead, Shota Aizawa. His tired eyes were fixed on 2 specific screens. "That blonde kid with the explosions. His combat sense is phenomenal. He's not just blasting wildly. Every move is precise, efficient. He's prioritizing targets, using his environment. He's fighting like a pro." On the screen, Katsuki was a whirlwind of destruction. He turned a corner and came face to face with a massive 3-pointer. Without hesitation, he launched himself into the air, using smaller blasts to dodge the robot's clumsy swipes. He landed on its shoulder, placed his palm directly on the joint connecting its arm to its torso, and unleashed a powerful, contained explosion. AP shot! The arm was severed, crashing to the street below. He repeated the process on the other arm and then its legs, disabling the giant in under 10 seconds before moving on, not even bothering to watch it fall. "His point total is already through the roof," Midnight noted, a pleased smirk on her face. "He's a top contender for sure. But he's not the interesting one," Aizawa said, his gaze shifting to another monitor. "Look at this one," the screen showed Izuku. He had just helped a boy with a naval laser quirk who had been pinned down by a 2-pointer. Izuku had created a diversion by setting off a car alarm, allowing the boy to get a clear shot. Izuku himself hadn't engaged. "The quirkless one," another hero commented, checking his file. "Midoriya Izuku. He has 0 villain points." "What's so interesting about him?" "He has 0 villain points," Aizawa repeated, a rare hint of intrigue in his voice. "But look at the students around him. The girl with the earphone jacks, the boy with the laser. Their scores are climbing steadily. This Midoriya kid isn't fighting, but he's enabling others to fight more effectively. He's creating openings, running interference. He's acting as a support hero." Nizu's whiskers twitched. "Oh? That is interesting. Pull up a tactical overlay of Battle Center B, if you would." A holographic map of the city appeared in the center of the room. Red dots signified villains, and blue dots signified examinees. Most of the blue dots were clustered in the city center, a chaotic mosh pit of quirks and scrap metal. But 2 dots were following a distinct, deliberate pattern on the outer edges. 1 dot, belonging to Bakugo, was leaving a trail of vanquished red dots in its wake. The other, Midoriya's, was moving parallel to it, weaving between other blue dots, never staying in one place for long. "They're working together," Nizu chirped, his black eyes gleaming with intellectual delight. "They've split the city. The explosive one is acting as a sweeper, clearing a path. The quirkless one is running support and rescue. They're functioning like a professional hero team that's been partnered for years." All Might, sitting in the back in his skeletal form, felt a swell of pride so intense it almost made him cough up blood. "They're doing it. They're actually doing it. But there are no points for that kind of behavior," Cementos pointed out. "As impressive as it is, the kid will end up with a score of 0. Will he?" Nizu asked, a sly smile on his face. He took a sip of his tea. "The public believes the exam is a simple combat test. It makes for good television. But we are looking for more than just raw power. We are looking for heroes." He tapped a button on his console. "Let's see how they handle a real crisis." Back in Battle Center B, Izuku glanced at his watch. 7 minutes down. 2 minutes until the rendezvous. His rescue and evade strategy was working, but it was taking a toll. He was physically exhausted, and he hadn't even used his quirk. Suddenly, the ground began to shake. Not a small tremor, but a deep, earth-shattering rumble. A colossal shadow fell over the street, eclipsing the sun. Izuku looked up, and his blood ran cold. Towering over the multi-storied buildings, its massive form scraping against the rooftops, was the 0-point robot. The arena trap. It was bigger than he could have ever imagined, a true titan of metal and wiring, its single red optical eye glowing with menacing light. It took one step, and the street cracked under its weight. Buildings crumbled into dust. The other examinees, who had been fighting so fiercely moments before, were now screaming and running in the opposite direction. "Avoid it," President Mike had said. That was the advice, and Izuku was about to take it. He turned to run with the others, his heart pounding in his chest. But then he heard a cry. "Help! I'm stuck!" He looked back. The nice girl with the brown, bob-cut hair who had helped him at the gate was pinned under a huge slab of concrete, a casualty of the robot's rampage. She was trying to use her quirk, making pieces of rubble float, but the main slab was too heavy. The 0-pointer was lumbering closer, its massive foot poised to crush the very spot where she lay trapped. There were no heroes coming. The other students were in full retreat. It was just him. In that moment, 10 months of training, a lifetime of dreaming, and a sacred, borrowed power all converged. The egg in the microwave. He could feel one for all surging within him, a torrent of raw energy begging for release. He thought of All Might. He thought of Kaken. He thought of his promise. "I will be the savior." His legs, strengthened by months of hauling trash and running on sand, coiled like springs. He channeled the power, not all of it, just a fraction, a single, desperate drop into the ocean of his muscles. One for all. He pushed off the ground, and the world became a green blur. The asphalt beneath his feet shattered as he launched himself into the sky, a streak of emerald lightning. He was flying, soaring hundreds of feet into the air, right towards the 0-pointer's face. The wind roared in his ears. The height was terrifying. He saw the robot's massive head turn towards him, its red eye focusing on the new threat. He pulled his right arm back, channeling the entirety of the raw, untamed power into his fist. He knew what was about to happen. He knew it would break him. But the girl was still trapped below. Destroyer and savior. Sometimes, the savior had to do some destroying. Smash! His fist connected with the robot's metal face. The impact was apocalyptic. The sound was a deafening kaboom that was heard across the entire battle center. The robot's head didn't just dent, it imploded. The shockwave from the punch rippled through its entire chassis, shattering its internal mechanisms. The Titan shuddered, its red eye went dark, and it began to topple backwards, away from the trapped girl. But the power came at a cost. An agony unlike anything Izuku had ever known shot through his arm. He looked down and saw his limb, grotesquely swollen, purple and mangled, twisted at an unnatural angle. The bones had turned to dust. The pain was so immense it stole his breath. And then, gravity reasserted itself. He was hundreds of feet in the air, with 2 broken legs from the jump and 1 shattered arm from the punch. He was falling, a broken puppet tumbling towards the unforgiving ground. This is it, he thought, a strange sense of calm washing over him. I saved her. I guess this is an okay way to go. Suddenly, a series of explosions echoed below him. He saw a familiar figure rocketing towards him from the east, leaving a trail of smoke and fire. DKU! Katsuki screamed, his face a mask of furious panic. He had been on the other side of the city, mopping up his 30th robot, when he heard the earth-shattering boom. It wasn't one of his. It was bigger. He looked up just in time to see the 0-pointer collapsing and a tiny green figure falling from the sky. He pushed his quirk harder than he ever had before, a continuous, roaring jet of flame propelling him upwards. He was moving faster than he'd ever flown. He reached Izuku just 50 feet from the ground. You absolute, goddamn moron! He roared, wrapping an arm around Izuku's waist. He couldn't just catch him. The momentum would break them both. He had to slow their descent. He aimed his free hand at the ground and let out a series of powerful, controlled explosions. Boom! 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 Each blast acted as a brake, slowing their plummet, the concussive force rattling their teeth. They hit the ground hard, but it was a survivable landing, not a fatal impact. Katsuki collapsed to his knees, holding the broken, unconscious form of his best friend. Izuku's arm was a wreck. Both of his legs were clearly shattered. "Izuku!" Katsuki yelled, shaking him gently. "Hey! Wake up!" The nice, brown-haired girl, now free from the rubble, rushed over. "Oh my God! He's alive," Katsuki snapped, his voice tight with a fear he would never admit to. He looked down at Izuku's ruined limbs. "He did this for you?" The girl nodded, tears in her eyes. "He saved me." Before anyone could say another word, the klaxon sounded, signaling the end of the exam. "Time's up." In the observation room, the heroes were silent. They had all watched the scene unfold on the main screen, their casual analysis replaced by stunned disbelief. "My word," Cementouse whispered. "That power." "He destroyed the arena trap with a single punch," Midnight said, her hand over her mouth. "But the backlash, it completely destroyed his body." Aizawa leaned forward, his eyes narrowed, his knuckles white where he gripped the console. He had seen potential in the boy's strategy. He had not expected this. This was not strategy. This was reckless, self-sacrificial madness. It was the kind of thing that got heroes killed. But then he watched the aftermath. The explosive boy Bakugo, who had a phenomenal score and every reason to stay clear, had immediately abandoned his own objectives. He had risked his own safety, pushed his quirk to its limit, not to score points, but to save his friend. Niza finally broke the silence, his cheerful tone returning. "Well now, that was quite the spectacle." He turned to the other teachers. "So, what did we learn?" "We learned that Midoriya Izuku possesses a self-destructive quirk of incredible power," Aizawa stated flatly. "He's not suited for hero work. He'd be a liability." "Is that all you saw, Aizawa?" Niza countered, his beady eyes twinkling. "I saw a boy who, despite having no points, and every reason to run, chose to save a fellow examinee at great personal cost. An act of true heroism. And I saw another boy, our top scorer, abandon a perfect run to save his friend without a moment's hesitation." He brought the holographic map back up. He highlighted Bakugo's path of destruction, colored in red for his villain points. The final tally was an astonishing 77 points, a new UA record. "Young Bakugo has the highest villain point score in the history of this exam," Nizu announced. "He is, by all metrics, a perfect combatant." He then highlighted Izuku's path. It was still blank. 0 villain points. "But we here at UA know that a hero is more than just someone who can punch villains," Niza continued, a sly grin spreading across his face. "There are other ways to be a hero, which is why, for many years, we have had a hidden scoring metric. The judges have been watching. We award points for acts of heroism. For saving others, for cooperation, for self-sacrifice." He pressed another button. A new score began to tally up beside Izuku's name. The brown-haired girl he saved, Uraraka Achiko, had gone to present Mike as soon as the exam ended and begged him to give the boy who saved her some of her points. Other students whom Izuku had helped also came forward. The judges awarded him points for each of those acts. But the big one came from his final act, for saving another examinee from imminent danger at extreme personal risk, and for taking down the 0-point obstacle in the process. The number next to Izuku's name shot up. It landed on 60. "A massive 60 rescue points," Aizawa Niza said gently. "A quirk that powerful, if honed and controlled, could save millions. A spirit that selfless is one in a generation. It is not our job to discard such potential because it is dangerous. It is our job to nurture it. To teach him to control it." He then pressed one final button, and a new column appeared on the scoreboard, next to Bakugo's and Midoriya's names. It was labeled, Synergy Score, and for the first time, Nizu announced to the room, "We have observed a level of teamwork so advanced, so instinctual, that it warrants its own evaluation. For their coordinated strategy, mutual support, and combined effort resulting in both the highest villain score and the highest rescue score, Bakugo Katsuki and Midoriya Izuku are awarded an additional 20 points each to their final tallies." The final scores appeared on the screen. First place, Bakugo Katsuki 97 points, 77 villain, 20 synergy. Second place, Midoriya Izuku 80 points, 0 villain, 60 rescue, 20 synergy. The other heroes stared at the results. The two boys from the same junior high, a team from the moment they entered the arena, had completely dominated the exam in two completely different, yet perfectly complementary, ways. Aizawa leaned back in his chair, a long, weary sigh escaping his lips. He looked at the screen, at the image of Recovery Girl healing the broken boy while his explosive friend stood guard, refusing to leave his side. They're going to be a handful, Aizawa grumbled. Nisa's grin was wider than ever. Oh, I do hope so, Aizawa. I do hope so. He took a final, delighted sip of his tea. This year's class was going to be very, very interesting. The week between the UA entrance exam and the arrival of the acceptance letters was a strange, liminal space for Izuku Midoriya. Most of his time was spent in a state of profound, bone-deep ache. Recovery Girl's quirk was a miracle, knitting his shattered bones back together with accelerated healing, but it did so by draining his stamina to near zero. He spent the first 3 days mostly asleep, waking only to eat the nutrient-rich meals his mother tearfully prepared for him. Katsuki was a constant presence. He'd show up at the Midoriya apartment every afternoon after his own training, letting himself in with a familiar "yo, auntie," and planting himself in the chair beside Izuku's bed. He wouldn't say much. Sometimes he'd just scroll through hero news on his phone, providing a quiet, grounding presence. Other times he'd bring his homework, grumbling about pre-calculus, and Izuku, his mind sharp even if his body was wrecked, would talk him through the problems from his pillow. Your punch was stupid, Katsuki said one afternoon, not looking up from his phone. It was the first time he directly addressed the zero-pointer incident. Izuku, who was propped up on 3 pillows, flinched. I know. I'm sorry. I had to. Yeah, I know you had to, Katsuki grunted, finally looking at him. His expression wasn't angry, it was intensely serious. But it was still stupid. You can't be a savior if you're a corpse. We need to figure out how you can use that power without turning your bones into goddamn gravel. That's priority 1. It wasn't a scolding. It was a mission statement. It was the first item on their new, shared agenda. We need to figure it out. The relief that washed over Izuku was so potent it was almost dizzying. Kaken wasn't mad he'd been reckless. He was already focused on solving the problem. The day the letters came, Katsuki was there. He tore his own envelope open with aggressive confidence, his eyes scanning the holographic projection of All Might with a smirk. 77 villain points, a new record. 20 synergy points. Passed first place. Duh. He tossed the device onto Izuku's bed. Your turn. Izuku's hands trembled as he opened his own letter. He half expected a rejection, a letter telling him his self-destructive power was too much of a liability. But then All Might's image flickered to life, booming with pride. He explained the hidden rescue point system, the praise for his heroic act. And so, Midoriya, my boy, with 60 rescue points, you have passed the exam. All Might declared. Then he leaned closer to the camera, his voice dropping. Oh, and one more thing. A new category, just for you two. They're calling it a synergy score. Your combined efforts were so impressive they literally had to invent a new way to measure it. Another 20 points for you. Welcome, young Midoriya. This is your Hero Academia. Izuku stared at his final score, 80 points. Second place, right behind Katsuki. He burst into tears, a flood of relief and joy and disbelief. Katsuki just grunted, but there was a fierce pride in his eyes. He clapped Izuku on his still sore shoulder, a little too hard. Told you. Number 1 and number 2. Now hurry up and get healed. We've got work to do. The first day of school at UA High was everything Izuku had ever dreamed of. The building itself was a monument to heroism, the iconic H-shaped structure a symbol of hope recognized across the nation. Walking through its massive gates, this time as an official student, felt surreal. Stop looking like a tourist about to have a heart attack, Katsuki grumbled, nudging him forward. It's just a school. It's not just a school, Kaken. It's UA. The alma mater of All Might himself. The halls are wider than normal to accommodate transformation quirks. The support pillars are made of reinforced tungsten carbide to withstand battle damage. Yeah, I get it, you nerd, Katsuki cut him off, but he was smirking. Save the analysis for when we're actually fighting something. Classroom 1A? This way. The door to their classroom was ridiculously oversized, a clear indicator of the scale of quirks they might encounter. Izuku took a deep, shaky breath, his hand hovering over the handle. This was it, the next chapter. He was about to meet his classmates, the future heroes he would fight alongside. Katsuki, having no patience for dramatic tension, simply shoved the door open and strode inside. The first person they saw was the stern, blue-haired boy from the orientation. He was standing rigidly by a desk, making sharp, chopping motions with his hands as he lectured another student. The moment he saw them, he marched over, his movements like a well-oiled machine. "Good morning," he announced, his voice projecting across the room. "My name is Tenya Ida, from the semi-private academy." He turned to Izuku first, bowing a stiff 90 degrees. "Midoriya, I must apologize for my behavior at the orientation. You correctly ascertained the true nature of the exam, while I failed to see it. I was blinded by the literal text." "You are clearly the superior student," Izuku flushed, waving his hands frantically. "Oh no, not at all. I was just muttering, you were right to call me out, it's a bad habit." Ida then turned to Katsuki, his expression equally serious. "And you, Bakugo. Your combat prowess was truly exceptional. And your final act, to abandon your own score to save your friend. A noble, heroic decision. I was deeply impressed." Katsuki just raised an eyebrow. "It wasn't a decision. He's my partner. You don't leave your partner to fall out of the sky. That's just basic." The simple, matter-of-fact way he said it seemed to short-circuit Ida's brain. He stood there, blinking, processing the statement. The idea of such ingrained, instinctual loyalty was a new concept to him. "Ah, I see. A pre-established partnership. Excellent. Fostering such bonds is key to effective hero work." Ida chopped the air decisively. Their attention was drawn by a cheerful voice. "Oh, it's you guys." The nice girl with the round face and brown bob cut from the exam was beaming at them. "I'm Uraraka Achiko. Wow, that punch was amazing, Midoriya. So incredible. And Bakugo, the way you flew up and caught him, so cool. You two were like something out of a movie." Izuku turned beet red, stammering incomprehensibly, while Katsuki just gave a short, sharp nod of acknowledgement. "He's the one with the crazy power. I'm just the one who makes sure he doesn't kill himself with it." This straightforward, non-arrogant declaration caught Uraraka, and a few other nearby students who were listening in, by surprise. They had all seen the explosive kid's overwhelming power during the exam. They had expected a mountain of ego. Instead, they got this. A blunt, pragmatic kid who openly acknowledged his partner's strength and his own role in their team. The dynamic was magnetic. It was unusual. In a room full of aspiring number one heroes, each an individual powerhouse from their respective schools, here were two who operated as a single, perfectly balanced unit. It immediately set them apart, not as rivals, but as a unit, a center of gravity around which the rest of the class was already beginning to orbit. Their interactions were interrupted by a tired voice from the doorway. "If you're here to make friends, you can pack up your bags and leave." Everyone turned. A man who looked like he hadn't slept in a decade was lying on the floor inside a yellow sleeping bag, looking like a disheveled caterpillar. He took a long sip from a juice pouch before unzipping himself and standing up. He was wearing a black jumpsuit and a strange, scarf-like capture weapon around his neck. "Welcome to UA's Hero Course," he said, his voice a monotone drone. "It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down. That's not going to work. Time is a precious resource. You're not kids on a playground." He scanned the room with bored, bloodshot eyes. "My name is Shota Aizawa. I'm your homeroom teacher." The collective shock in the room was palpable. This exhausted-looking guy is a pro-hero. Aizawa didn't give them time to process. He pulled a blue UA gym uniform from his sleeping bag. "Put these on and meet me on the field." Now, the field was vast, the perfectly manicured grass a stark contrast to Aizawa's unkempt appearance. The 20 students of Class 1A stood in neat rows, clad in their new gym uniforms, a nervous energy buzzing between them. A quirk assessment test? Uraraka asked, her voice laced with confusion. But what about orientation? And the welcome ceremony? Here at UA, we're not bound by tradition, Aizawa said, his back to them. That means I get to run my class however I see fit. You've all been taking standardized tests your whole lives, but you've never been allowed to use your quirks in physical exams. It's not rational. The ministry is run by fossils. He turned, his gaze sweeping over them, cold and analytical. Bakugo. You finished first in the entrance exam. What was your best softball throw in junior high? Katsuki didn't hesitate. 67 meters. Right, Aizawa tossed him a softball. Try it with your quirk. Katsuki walked to the chalk circle, a confident smirk playing on his lips. He stretched his arm, warming up the muscles. Izuku watched, a familiar sense of anticipation bubbling in his chest. Show him, Kaken. Katsuki began to swing his arm, rotating his body to build up momentum. Just before he released the ball, he cupped his hand, and with a perfectly timed, massive explosion, he launched it into the sky. Die! He roared as the ball rocketed away, leaving a smoke trail in its wake. Die! Izuku muttered to himself, a sweat drop forming on his brow. His battle cries could still use some work. The ball sailed through the air, a tiny speck against the blue sky, before finally landing far, far in the distance. Aizawa held up a small device, which beeped. He turned it around to show the class. 705.2 meters. The class erupted in gasps and exclamations. 705 meters? Seriously? A boy with yellow hair and a black lightning bolt streak exclaimed. Whoa! This looks fun! A pink-skinned girl cheered. We can use our quirks as much as we want. Awesome! Aizawa's face twisted into a menacing grin. Fun? You think this is fun? His eyes began to glow faintly, his hair levitating around him. The joyful atmosphere in the class instantly evaporated, replaced by a chilling dread. You have 3 years to become heroes. You think it's all going to be games and fun times? Idiots. Today, you will compete in 8 physical tests to gauge your potential. Whoever comes in last place. He paused for dramatic effect, will be judged to have no potential and will be expelled immediately. Panic swept through the ranks. Expulsion? On the first day? This had to be a joke, a scare tactic. But looking at Aizawa's cold, dead serious expression, no one was laughing. Izuku felt a knot of fear tighten in his stomach. A quirk assessment test. He had zero control over one for all. Using it would break him. Not using it would land him in last place. It was an impossible situation. Katsuki glanced at him, saw the panic in his eyes, and nudged him hard with his elbow. Relax, he muttered, just loud enough for Izuku to hear. He's not gonna expel anyone. How do you know? Izuku whispered back, his voice shaky. 'Cause it's not logical, Katsuki replied, echoing Aizawa's own words. Why would you go through the whole trouble of the entrance exam, find 20 promising students, and then kick one out on the first day based on a test that's massively biased towards certain quirk types? It's a rational deception. A scare tactic to get us to go all out. So stop panicking and start thinking. How can you use what you have without breaking yourself? Izuku stared at him. He was right. Of course he was right. Panic was clouding his judgment. Aizawa was testing them, not just their quirks, but their mindset. He needed to be smart about this. He needed a plan. The tests began. The 50-meter dash was first. Ida, using the engines in his calves, cleared it in 3.04 seconds. Katsuki used a series of small, continuous explosions to propel himself, finishing in 4.13 seconds, a fantastic time. When it was Izuku's turn, he just ran. His time was 7.02 seconds. Abysmal. He could feel the pitying looks from his classmates. The grip strength test. The standing long jump, where Katsuki easily cleared the sandbox. The side-to-side stepping. In every single test, Izuku's scores were painfully average, a stark contrast to his peers who were using their amazing quirks to achieve superhuman results. He was falling further and further behind, the threat of expulsion, rational or not, looming over him like a guillotine. He saw the way Aizawa was looking at him. It wasn't pity. It was disappointment. It was the look of a teacher who had seen his incredible power in the exam and was now seeing nothing but a timid, hesitant failure. Finally, it was the last event, the ball throw. One by one, his classmates stepped up. Uraraka tapped the ball, making it weightless, and threw it. The device read infinity. The class stared in awe. At last, it was Izuku's turn. He stood in the circle, the soft ball feeling heavy and cold in his hand. This was his last chance. He had to do something. He had to prove he belonged here. Okay. Focus. Control. Don't use your whole arm. Not 100%. Just a little. A tiny bit. Just in the tip of my finger. Like flicking a bottle cap. The egg in the microwave. Don't break the egg. He took a deep breath, drew his arm back, and felt the familiar, thrumming power of One for All begin to surge. He focused it, forcing the torrent of energy down his arm, past his elbow, through his wrist, compressing it all into the very tip of his index finger. He threw the ball. As it left his hand, he flicked his finger, releasing that tiny spark of immense power. The ball shot forward with a sonic boom, a flash of green light briefly illuminating his fingertip. It soared into the air, a tiny comet leaving a pressure trail in its wake. He had done it. He had used his power without. His finger throbbed with a sharp, searing pain. It was swollen and purple, clearly broken, but it was just his finger. Not his whole arm. He could still fight. He had done it. He looked at Aizawa, a triumphant, pain-filled grin on his face. The teacher held up the device. 46 meters. Izuku's grin vanished. What? But I definitely felt. I erased your quirk, Aizawa said, his eyes glowing a menacing red, his capture weapon floating around him like angry serpents. The class gasped. So he's Eraserhead? Someone whispered. The underground hero who could cancel quirks just by looking at someone. Aizawa strode towards Izuku, his expression grim. I saw your entrance exam. You destroyed a colossal robot, but you destroyed yourself in the process. You can't keep pulling stunts like that. A hero who is a one-trick pony, who incapacitates himself after every move, is a liability. You can't save anyone if you're the one who needs saving. He blinked, and the glow in his eyes faded. The power surged back into Izuku. I've returned your quirk. You have one more throw. Get it done. Show me you're not a lost cause. He stepped back, his arms crossed. The entire class was silent, all eyes on Izuku. The pressure was immense. He was being told, point blank, that his only known method of using his power was unacceptable. He had one chance to prove he could be something more. He looked down at the ball, his mind racing. Aizawa was right. Kaken was right. He couldn't just be a glass cannon. He had to be smarter. But how? How could he get a hero-level score without shattering his bones? He looked at his broken finger. The pain was a sharp, clear reminder of the cost. But he also remembered the feeling. The control. He had successfully contained the power to a single point. It was a breakthrough. The first step. He took a deep breath, looking at Katsuki, who was standing with the rest of the class. His friend wasn't shouting encouragement. He was just watching, his expression intense, analytical. It wasn't a look of doubt. It was a look of expectation. Think, Deku. You're the strategist. Solve the problem. And then, it hit him. Aizawa wanted to see potential. Not just raw power, but the potential for growth, for control, for ingenuity. Throwing it with his broken finger was out. Using his other arm would just break that one too. But the power, it wasn't just for punching. He remembered their training. Use your damn legs, not your back. Katsuki had yelled. Low center of gravity. Drive up. It was about channeling power from the ground up. All the strength training, all the hours hauling trash, it all came down to this. He took his stance again. He drew his arm back, but this time, he didn't focus on his arm at all. He focused on his core, on his legs, on his connection to the ground. He let one for all surge, but he didn't try to contain it. He let it flow through his entire body, a circuit of raw energy. He felt his muscles scream, the power threatening to tear him apart. But then he did something different. He didn't release it all in one explosive burst. He channeled the vast majority of that power down, into the ground, as an anchor. He used it to reinforce his stance, to root himself. And then, at the very last second, he allowed just a tiny, controlled fraction of that immense energy, a mere 5%, to surge up through his body, into his arm, and into the ball. He threw. The ball shot forward, not with the apocalyptic force of his exam punch, but with a sharp, powerful crack. It flew with incredible velocity, cutting a clean arc through the sky. It wasn't a nuke, it was a cannonball. Behind him, Izuku stumbled, his entire body trembling from the strain. His arm ached, his legs felt like jelly, but nothing was broken except his one finger. He had done it. He had used the power without destroying himself. He looked up at Katsuki. His friend's intense expression had been replaced by a wide, feral grin of pure pride. He gave Izuku a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. That's it. That's the answer. Aizawa looked at his device, then at Izuku. A slow, tiny smile, the first one they'd seen, touched the corner of his lips. He turned the device to the class. 705.3 meters. A wave of shock and awe rippled through the students. He beat Bakugo's score by 1/10 of a meter. How? His arm didn't even break. Katsuki let out a short, sharp laugh. Hell yeah, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. He walked over and clapped Izuku on the back, ignoring his wince of pain. See? Told you he had it. He didn't see it as being beaten. He saw it as his partner finally getting on the scoreboard. It was a victory for the team. This simple, unadulterated display of pride in his friend's success was, for many in the class, more shocking than the throw itself. The number one student wasn't angry or jealous that he'd been surpassed. He was thrilled. Kirishima Eijiro, a boy with a hardening quirk, watched with wide, admiring eyes. Whoa, those two are so manly. The dynamic of Class 1A shifted in that moment. The seed of rivalry that could have sprouted between the two strongest students was replaced by a powerful, undeniable core of mutual support. Their friendship became a quiet lesson for the rest of the class. It wasn't about being the single strongest individual. It was about pushing each other to be better, celebrating each other's victories as your own. Aizawa watched the interaction, his analytical gaze softening slightly. By the way, he said, his voice back to its usual monotone drone. I was lying about the expulsion. It was a rational deception to push you to your limits. The class erupted in outrage, save for a tall, black-haired girl who calmly stated she thought as much. As the class headed back to the locker rooms, Izuku was mobbed. Midoriya, that was incredible. How did you control your power like that? He was flustered, stammering, completely unused to this kind of positive attention. Katsuki acted as a human shield, shoving people back with a gruff, give him some space, extras. He's gotta go see the old lady about his finger. As they walked, slightly separated from the group, Katsuki bumped his shoulder. 705.3. You just had to show me up by 1/10 of a point, you damn nerd. There was no heat in the words, only amusement. I didn't mean to, Izuku said frantically. It just came out that way. Good, Katsuki said, his grin sharp. Means I've got a new record to beat. Means I have to get stronger. He looked at Izuku, his red eyes blazing with fiery determination. And you have to learn how to do that again, but without breaking your finger next time. Deal? Deal, Izuku said, a genuine, confident smile on his face. They had passed their first test. But more than that, they had established themselves. Not as Bakugo and his weird, quiet friend, but as Midoriya and Bakugo. A partnership. A team. An anchor in a sea of prodigies. They were the center of gravity for Class 1A, and their shared pull was already beginning to draw everyone else into a stronger, more collaborative orbit.